Hello, welcome to Chapter 3. Today we're discussing listening. But what is listening? What is the difference between hearing and listening? Hearing is passive and listening is active. Hearing is the notion of sound vibrations passing through the eardrum, vibrating on the three little bones inside your ear, being transmitted to your ear, to your brain, to determine that it is a noise. Listening is actually paying attention to what that noise specifically is. The book defines listening as the active process of constructing meaning from spoken messages through attention to verbal and nonverbal codes that accompany the messages. Now, I want the biggest thing to hear, pay attention to this, is that listening is an active process. You cannot passively sit along and listen. You have to pay attention. Now, the book has this broke down as the time usage of typical communication of an average college student. I would say that this data might be a little bit out of date, as I don't believe that it's necessarily 20% anymore that the college student is listening or speaking, and 24% listening, with only 8% reading. Not with text messages, Snapchats, and all those. I'm saying that the speaking and listening has been reduced significantly, with reading and internet usage being expanded and writing being expanded greatly. Anyway, there are basically 4 stages to listening, and these stages align close to perceptions. The first stage, attending, is we become aware of the information. We're paying attention to it. We're attending to it, realizing that there is a noise to listen to. The second is the organizational. It's that understanding. We organize that data into something we can handle. Like we said in perceptions, well, in listening, we're trying to understand what's being said. The third is interpreting data. In this case, it is responding. It is hearing it, listening to it, and responding to it. If you're in some situations, that maybe it's nothing more than nodding your head. It might actually be thumbs up. It might be okay. It might be you're actually nodding, saying okay. We've all been on the phone and someone's talking to us and said, yep, yeah, got it, That is the responding stage. The last stage of listening is probably the hardest stage, and that's remembering. We tend to listen to people a lot. We hear a lot. We listen a lot. Often that stuff goes in one ear and out the other. We hear it long enough to respond to it. We talk to the people, and then we walk away, and there's like, what did they say? So remembering is a portion of listening that really needs to be built on. But why is listening so important? What is it about listening that is important? Why should we care? Why should we study listening? Why should we learn it? Well, first, it helps us develop and maintain relationships. Listening allows us to enhance our relationships beyond what they are. If we can't listen to our partner, we will not hear what they're saying, they will not feel heard, they will not be happy, and it will crumble and fall apart around you. You must listen and be heard. Everybody likes to be heard. It'll help us in a career. This is pretty straightforward. If you're not listening to your boss and you don't do what your boss says, you're not going to get that raise, and there's a very good possibility you're going to end up fired. So we need to listen. You need to pay attention. You need to know what's going on. It'll help us become better citizens. If we are listening to the topics, we're listening to what's going on, we are more inclined to be responsive voters, to know what they're saying to us. We listen to our candidates, and we'll talk about some of these critical listening skills in a minute, but you need to listen to your candidates, and if you're listening to them, then you're gathering more information and you're being a better citizen. The next, it helps us develop and maintain our mental health. I think this is a reciprocal situation, and when I talk about reciprocal, I want to understand that that's a give and take. It goes back and forth. So I'm listening to you. You feel heard. You tend to listen to me. I feel heard. My mental health state goes up and is better. I've gained from not only listening to you, but also being heard by you. So it helps develop our mental health. But what are some of the barriers to listening? First and foremost is noise. Now, we talked about noise in Chapter 1. We've got semantic noise and physiological noise and psychological noise, and there's just all kinds of noise. I'd like to contest that the slides are from the developer, and I would say that the next steps are all noise. We have informational processing. This is semantic noise. This is the whole idea that you're not getting what they're saying. It doesn't make sense. You have generated cultural differences. Either it's language barrier, or it could just quite literally be that the interpretation of what's being said is not the same. You have gender orientation. Again, each gender is slightly different. We're like a co-culture. It is a co-culture, and it affects your listening. And then, of course, there's just poor listening habits. I will lump it into noise only because, let's face it, there's plenty of people that don't pay attention. There's probably people listening to this speech, this lecture right now, not paying attention. So that's part of it. Now, one of the things that the book covers is informational listening, and this is very important. This is key to your classwork, key to school, all of that. This is listening to learn something. This is that. So first off, you need to prepare to listen. If there is information that you can read up on ahead of time before class, read it. Do the reading so that when you're listening in class, you're not trying to muddle through with that semantic noise because you don't understand the terms because you didn't prepare. Avoid prejudices, prejudging. So don't just assume you know the data. Don't assume the data is useless because you can't see a use for it immediately. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get to where you understand why you need to know what you need to know. Mentally organize this data. As it's coming in, as people are talking, sometimes we go a little bit willy-nilly. Some of us go sideways, oh, squirrel, that stuff. But organize it. Put it in something, an organization that works for you. Summarize it in your head to make sure you're getting all the little bits and pieces, and then try to link that information together. So we all know that culture ties to gender, ties to biases, ties to perceptions, and all that. Then personalize the information while you're listening to it. Pay attention to that information and make it fit you and your thought process. So as you're talking, as I'm talking about listening and I'm talking about personalizing it, you might be trying to tie this into lecture or class notes or talking to your mom or whatever. Now take skillful notes. Now on a side note to this, it has been proven that doodling actually will help you retain data better than nothing at all. I am a doodler. I will make sketch notes and I doodle. The downfall to doodling is that when you go back later, doodles are useless for you to study with to regain your knowledge of what you had seen or said. So you need to take notes that make sense to you. When you're taking notes in class, the first thing you need to do is take notes written. Don't type them. They have shown that you engage many more neurons and cognitive pathways by using handwritten notes in opposed to typing. So you will retain more if you're handwriting the notes. The next thing that they'll tell you to do, I don't know who they is, but the next thing that you know to do is that when you go home after the end of the class, sit down and write your notes. Do it immediately. Don't wait a week, because what happens is if you do it immediately, you get that opportunity to say, oh, well, that didn't make sense. What were we talking about? And you think back, okay, they were talking about this, and you can fill in the blanks to cover the gaps that you may have missed in your note taking. You also get the time to write it slower, neater, cleaner, so that in a week or 2 weeks when you're studying for that exam, you've got the information available to you. As the people are talking and as you're listening, you need to paraphrase and you need to ask questions. If you don't understand something, ask. If you don't understand what paraphrasing is, what that means is taking someone's words, working them into your words to say basically the same thing. So when you're paraphrasing, you're wanting to understand or explain to these people why on earth, or make sure that they know. So you say that you're listening and it reemphasizes what you're saying, what was being said to you, helps you understand better. Now, this is a little bit weird for us just because the book breaks this down into critical listening and empathic listening. We will cover them both. A lot of people lump them together. It doesn't matter. The elements are the same. You just got to understand the usage of each one. So let's start with critical listening. And first, we have to do a little background. You need to understand some Greek. That is ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is the emotional or the ethical appeal or the speaker's credibility. That is that spokesperson mentality. If I'm standing in front of the class talking to you, I have my ethos that I have a master's, I have this, I have that, I've studied this, I've done that. That is my ethos. That's what it is. The next one is logos. That's my logic. I'm explaining to you the logic of listening, why you should listen, all that. The next one is pathos. This is your emotional appeal. I won't necessarily use it much in class, but you'll see it, and you'll see it especially like in the ASPCA ads where they've got the sad music playing and they've got, all the horrible pictures of all the poor animals, and then they're talking really quiet and they want you to give money. That is playing on your emotional appeal. That is your pathos. So we've got ethos, logos, pathos. When you're listening to someone critically, you need to pay attention to that ethos. You need to see that the person actually has the credibility that they're trying to portray. So when you see the ad with Matthew McConaughey driving a Cadillac, and they're using him as his credibility because he's Matthew McConaughey, does he actually carry any real credibility for selling you a car? Probably not. He may drive a Cadillac. He may think Cadillac's the best car on the road. But that's still just a personal opinion. I mean, it's not like he's a race car driver that's driven every car on the road and he's saying that you need to buy a Cadillac because it's awesome and it's durable and trustworthy and all that stuff. So pay attention to their ethos. Pay attention to their logic. I'm sure a lot of you saw that meme that came out the other day that was talking about the Powerball winnings. The Powerball is at $1.5 billion with 300 million Americans, people in the United States. You could divide it and each person would get $4.33 million. Great logic. End the poverty issue in the United States altogether. Except their math was bad. It wasn't 4.33 million, it was $4.33. So pay attention to the logic. Pay attention to the logos. When someone's speaking to you, make sure the logic works. Then pay attention to the pathos. Make sure that the emotional appeal is not clouding your judgment. It's not doing what it is. Whenever you're doing this, you need to pay attention to your critical listening skills. You need to listen. You need to paraphrase. You need to ask questions. All of those tie together to try to ensure that what you're hearing is factual and that you're understanding it and they're not pulling the wool over your eyes. Now, some of the logic fallacies that you'll run into are here. I'm not going to cover all of these. You'll find them in your book. You'll find them in the e-learn under the assignment document. So this is all information that's available to you. Ad hominem means you're attacking the person instead of the person's argument. You'll see Donald Trump do this a lot and just say, oh, that's just stupid. You're just dumb. Or ad populum, that's a common one. Claiming the idea is true because everybody knows it's true. Yeah, it's all true. No, it's not. Ad verecundium is claiming idea is true because an esteemed person says it's true. So because Matthew McConaughey says you ought to buy that Cadillac, it's the best car on the road, it must be true. And then there's there's all these other ones, but my favorite one here is the slippery slope. And we'll use gun control for that one. President Obama came out with trying to get registration, trying to close some of those loopholes so people have to have background checks to buy a firearm. Well, now with the background check, everybody's going to know where the guns are, and therefore the government's going to take away our guns. Background check equals confiscation of guns. That's that slippery slope. So when you're doing your critical thinking, you pay attention to the fallacies in this logic. Now, as I said before, we've got critical listening, we've got empathic listening. Many people use the terms interchangeably, or they'll tie empathic listening all the way into critical listening. It's all listening. And it's all a matter of choosing the right data. While you're critically listening, while you're listening to someone, even though you're maybe critically listening to them and you're listening to a logic and you're listening to that, when you're trying to do it empathically, you're trying to pay attention. Empathic listening is dealing with emotions. If you've ever watched a sci-fi show, an empath is someone who can sense somebody else's emotions. So when you're empathic listening, you're sensing and adjusting those to listening. First thing you need to do is supportive responses. Yes, I see. I understand. That makes sense. We're trying to support this person. You're trying to help them talk without talking them down. You're not just sitting there silent. You're giving them support. Next is use interpreting responses. Oh, so that makes sense. Now what are you saying, or whatever, or all those things. So you use some interpreting response. When you use questioning and paraphrasing responses. So not only are you interpreting what they're saying, and you're trying to say, okay, so this is that. You're paraphrasing, you're explaining it, you're reframing, you're telling them in a different light so that they can understand it, so you make sure that you're understanding it. You're asking them questions, and all of this stuff is coming out, and you're trying to find out. You're not asking hard questions. You're not trying to draw out hard, and you're using open-ended questions. So how does that make you feel? How do you see that working out? Things like that. Those kind of questions. Those things that will help draw out the question answers. Let the people talk. Let them explain to you what's being said. And the next thing is to avoid judging and advising responses. There is this thing called the myth of neutrality. As a mediator, we are neutral. We are out there. We are not allowed to take sides. We don't argue and say this one's right, that one's wrong, or that. We're neutral. We don't care whether you're right or wrong. It's there. The reality of it is that nobody is purely neutral. As soon as somebody opens their mouth, you make a judgment, and you start judging them, and you start having biases. The myth of neutrality is the whole notion that you are going to portray that you are neutral. You are not going to judge. You are not going to let it come across your face. You're not going to roll your eyes. You're not going to do any of that. You're going to pay attention to what's being said. And at the same time, you don't want to give advice. If your friend is thinking about breaking up with somebody and you tell them, no, you need to stay together, and then it ends horribly bad, you're the one that's responsible. So when you're listening empathically, when you're trying to help someone, you let them talk. You ask them questions so they know you're listening. You interpret what they're saying. You sometimes just paraphrase it back to them. Sometimes parroting exactly what they're saying helps. Ask them questions, draw it out, reframe things. All of this stuff is just to help them vent and to talk to you. You're not judging, you're not advising responses, you're not trying to come up with a solution for them unless they specifically ask for it. If they don't ask for advice and they don't ask for solutions, don't. My recommendation, though, is even if they ask for advice, dodge it. Avoid that like the plague, because that's just asking for trouble later. So whenever you can, pay attention, do your listening skills, listen critically, listen empathically, try to pay attention to the way people are talking. Make decisions based on facts and figures, not on your ethos, pathos, or logos. Listen to how people are talking, and basically just be a good listener.